This is a true story. This story was sent in by someone named Daniel. Daniel says the moment that stayed with him the longest was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, quiet enough that he almost ignored it at first. Looking back, he believes that silence was intentional, like whatever happened that night did not want attention right away. He worked the night shift at a small roadside motel on New Year's Eve, just outside a mid-sized town. During the day, the highway nearby was busy, but at night the area felt cut off from everything else. The lobby was narrow, lit by old fluorescent lights that buzzed softly overhead. There were no decorations, no holiday music, and no sign that it was the end of the year. An old television hung in the corner, and Daniel kept the volume low. Around 11:30 p.m., the final guest arrived. He was a middle-aged man wearing a dark jacket and carrying no visible luggage. He paid in cash, and Daniel noticed right away that the bills were folded neatly, stacked evenly, as if the man had prepared them long before arriving. He did not ask about breakfast, checkout time, or anything related to the holiday. He simply took the room key and walked upstairs without looking back. After that, the motel grew quiet. By 11:50 p.m., the parking lot was empty, and no cars passed by on the highway. Even the distant road noise felt muted. Daniel flipped through channels on the television until he stopped on a local New Year's Eve countdown. The cheerful voices felt wrong in the empty building, like they did not belong there. Almost out of habit, he checked the security monitor behind the desk. Every camera looked normal. The walkways were empty. The doors were closed. The stairwell showed no movement. Nothing appeared out of place. At 11:58 p.m., the front desk phone rang once. It was not a full ring, just a single sharp sound before going silent again. Daniel stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring a second time, but it never did. When he picked up the receiver, he heard nothing but a faint hum. He placed it back down and told himself it was just old equipment acting up. When midnight arrived, the television erupted in cheers and applause. Fireworks filled the screen. Daniel muted it almost immediately. The sudden silence felt heavier than before, pressing down on the lobby. That was when he heard footsteps upstairs. They were slow and deliberate, not rushed and not clumsy. The sound moved steadily from one end of the hallway to the other, then stopped, then started again. Daniel checked the security monitor and switched to the camera covering the second-floor hallway. The feed was clear and live, but the hallway was empty. No movement, no shadows, and no doors opening or closing. The footsteps continued anyway. They never lined up with what the camera showed. The timing always felt slightly off, like the sound was coming from somewhere the cameras could not see. Daniel tried to calm himself, telling himself that old buildings make noise and that sound travels strangely at night. Then, without warning, the footsteps stopped directly above the lobby. At 12:07 a.m., the front door slid open on its own. There was no wind, no headlights, and no one stepping inside. The motion sensor did not trigger the usual chime. Daniel stood up slowly and locked the door by hand, his heart pounding as the lock clicked into place. When he turned back toward the desk, the security monitor caught his attention again.
a figure was standing behind the front desk. It was not visible on the lobby camera, but it appeared on every other camera at the same time. The same unmoving shape stood close to each lens, facing it directly, its head tilted slightly, as if it knew it was being watched. Daniel shut off the monitors immediately. Almost at once, the footsteps returned upstairs, faster this time, moving back and forth as if circling the building. Daniel retreated into the locked office behind the desk and stayed there until morning, listening as the sounds slowly faded away. When the sun came up, the motel looked completely normal. The lobby was empty, the lights were steady, and the hallways were quiet. Daniel checked the security footage one last time and found nothing unusual. No figure, no movement, and no sign that anything had happened during the night. Daniel quit that morning without giving an explanation. He says he has never worked another night shift since then, and every New Year's Eve, when the countdown begins, he makes sure he is never alone, because he believes that somewhere in a quiet place like that motel, something is still waiting and listening for the year to change.
This is a second story. This story was sent in by someone named Melissa. Melissa says she always thought the silence was the worst part, not because it was sudden or shocking, but because it felt intentional, like something had carefully removed all sound and left her alone inside it. She lived alone in a third-floor apartment overlooking a residential blot that was usually noisy on New Year's Eve. In past years, the night was always filled with fireworks, shouting from balconies, and music echoing between buildings until well after midnight. Even when she stayed inside, the noise was constant and unavoidable. That night felt wrong almost immediately. Around 10 p.m., she opened her window expecting to hear the usual sounds and realized there was nothing outside at all. No distant traffic, no voices, no fireworks warming up early, just the faint hum of her refrigerator and the soft ringing in her ears that comes when a room is too quiet. She leaned out the window and looked down at the street. Everything looked normal. Street lights cast their usual yellow glow on the sidewalks. Cars were parked along the curb. Nothing appeared out of place, yet nothing moved. She checked her phone to reassure herself. Messages were coming in like normal. Friends sent videos of crowded apartments, fireworks lighting up the sky, people laughing and counting down together. Her phone vibrated in her hand, but outside her window, the street remained frozen. It felt like she was watching the rest of the world move forward while her building stayed behind. As the minutes passed, the silence became harder to ignore. At 11:40 p.m., a knock came from her front door. It was soft and careful, not rushed or impatient. Melissa froze for a moment before standing and checking the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. No one stood there. She waited, listening closely, but did not hear footsteps walking away or an elevator opening. About a minute later, the knock came again. 3 taps this time, evenly spaced. Melissa asked who it was, her voice low and unsure. No one answered. There was no sound at all on the other side of the door. She did not open it. Instead, she dragged a chair from the kitchen and wedged it under the handle, then returned to the couch with her phone in her hands. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as the seconds passed. At 11:59, every light in her apartment flickered at the same time. Not just one lamp, but all of them. For a brief moment, the room dimmed, then everything returned to normal.
Melissa held her breath, waiting for the power to go out, but it never did. Midnight came and went without a sound. There were no cheers, no fireworks, no distant noise of celebration. The silence felt heavier than before, pressing in from all sides. Melissa sat perfectly still, listening for anything that might break it. That was when the television turned on by itself. The screen did not show a channel or a menu. It showed a grainy black and white image of her own apartment hallway, as if viewed through a security camera she did not own. The image was slightly distorted, but clear enough to recognize the bedroom door at the far end. Near the edge of the frame, something stood just outside the light. It did not move closer. It did not move away. It simply remained there, partially hidden in the shadow. Melissa stared at the screen, trying to understand what she was seeing. She told herself it had to be some kind of signal interference or technical error, but the image stayed perfectly still. Then she heard a sound from inside her apartment, a knock coming from her bedroom door. It was slow and careful, matching the rhythm of the knocks she had heard earlier at her front door. Melissa did not move. She stayed on the couch, watching the screen, listening to the sound repeat once more before stopping completely. She stayed there for hours, afraid that if she stood up or looked away, something would change. When sunlight finally filled the room, the television went black on its own. The apartment felt normal again, quiet but ordinary. The hallway outside her door was empty. Later that day, her neighbors greeted her like nothing unusual had happened. No one mentioned the silence. No one mentioned missing fireworks. Melissa moved out a month later. She says New Year's Eve has never felt the same since then. The noise feels wrong, and the quiet feels worse, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to knock again.
Itsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun.
This last story was sent in by someone named Aaron. Aaron worked as a night dispatcher for a small delivery company that operated almost entirely after dark. Most of their routes ran through industrial zones and long stretches of rural road, places where nothing looked different at night except the lack of people. New Year's Eve was usually one of the quietest shifts of the year for him. After midnight, the drivers either finished early or checked in once before heading back, and the rest of the night passed slowly. That night followed the same pattern at first. By 12:15 a.m., only one driver was still out on the road, finishing a return route that cut through farmland and unlit highways. Aaron sat alone in the dispatch office, surrounded by low-humming computers, muted radio chatter, and a wall of monitors showing GPS maps and inactive camera feeds. Outside the office windows, the parking lot was empty and dark. There were no fireworks visible from that part of town, and no distant noise drifting in. It felt like the night had gone still after midnight instead of winding down. At 12:22 a.m., one of the phone lines lit up on his console. It was the remaining driver's number. Aaron answered immediately, expecting a routine check-in or a question about directions. The line connected, but the driver didn't speak. All Aaron could hear was the sound of wind pushing against the microphone and a faint, repetitive clicking noise, like a turn signal that had been left on without anyone noticing. Aaron asked if everything was okay. He repeated the driver's name and waited. For several seconds, there was no response, just the wind and the clicking. Then the driver finally spoke, but his voice was low and unsteady, barely louder than a whisper. He said he had pulled over on the side of a rural road because something felt wrong. Aaron asked him to explain what he meant, assuming it might be an animal in the road or a mechanical issue. The driver paused again before saying there was someone standing in front of the truck, directly in the headlights. Aaron asked for a description, expecting to hear about a person waving for help or maybe someone intoxicated wandering near the road. The driver went quiet. The clicking sound continued, steady and patient. When he spoke again, his voice sounded tight, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. He said, "It's looking at the date on the dashboard." Aaron didn't understand what that meant and asked him to repeat it. Before the driver could respond, the call dropped. Aaron immediately checked the GPS tracker. The truck hadn't moved. It was still parked along the same isolated stretch of road, miles from the nearest intersection. He tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. He radioed the route frequency, then the general channel. No response. The office felt heavier than before, the silence pressing in around the steady ticking of the wall clock. He contacted local authorities and explained the situation, keeping his voice professional even though his hands had started to shake. Afterward, he stayed at his desk with the phone line open, listening to the empty channel. Every small sound in the office seemed louder than usual, from the air conditioning cycling on and off to the soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. At 12:41 a.m., the phone line clicked on again, without ringing. Aaron froze for a moment before leaning forward. He didn't speak right away. He waited to hear the driver breathe. When the driver spoke, his voice had changed. The fear from earlier was gone, replaced by something flat and distant. He said the person had moved closer and was now standing right in front of the hood. Aaron asked if the headlights were still on it. The driver said they were, but the light didn't seem to reach it properly, like it stopped short. Aaron told him to lock the doors immediately and keep his eyes forward. There was a pause. Then the driver let out a soft laugh, quiet and out of place. He said, "It's already inside. It says the year isn't done with me yet." Aaron felt cold all over. He told the driver to stay on the line, to keep talking, to describe what he could see, anything at all. The driver didn't respond. The line went dead again, this time without static or background noise, as if it had been shut off deliberately. Emergency services reached the location just before dawn. The truck was exactly where the GPS had shown it all night. The engine was cold, the doors were locked from the inside. There were no signs of damage, no footprints near the road, and no indication of a struggle. The driver was gone, and nothing inside the truck appeared disturbed. Aaron finished his shift in silence. He says the office never felt the same after that night. Even during busy shifts, the quiet moments feel heavier. He still works dispatch, but he refuses to take calls after midnight on New Year's Eve. He says some calls aren't meant to be answered, especially the last one of the year.